Yeah, as Charlie alluded to, the main reason for my presentation today is Coastal Rainforest Safaris, a brand new business that we're starting. But before going into it, I find it best to give you a little bit of history. Coastal Rainforest Safaris is started by myself, Andrew Jones, who has run Kingfisher Wilderness Adventures for the last 21 years, and Mike Willie from Seawolf Adventures. I'm going to do a little presentation both on Kingfisher and Seawolf, and that'll kind of lead into our new business, the Coastal Rainforest Safaris. All three businesses are based up at the north end of Vancouver Island. Both Seawolf and Kingfisher are based out of Port McNeill, and Coastal Rainforest Safaris out of Port Hardy. Port Hardy is very easy to reach. It's about an hour and 15-minute flight from Vancouver with Pacific Coastal Airlines. And then Port McNeill is about a 30-minute taxi ride away from the Port Hardy Airport, and easy driving up Vancouver Island for those doing a longer vacation on Vancouver Island. We're about 4 hours from Nanaimo and about a 6-hour drive from Victoria. A little bit about Kingfisher. We do everything from 1 to 15-day trips. But really what we work with the tour operators and travel trade are on our 4-day, 3-night base camp kayak tours. No experience whether kayaking or camping is necessary. And we have 3 separate itineraries: our kayak with whales, which is a Canadian signature experience, our whales and grizzly bears, and family kayak with whales. So we have those running every week from our 2 base camps in the Johnstone Strait area of northern Vancouver Island. It's pretty well all-inclusive. Guests just need to bring their clothes and their toothbrush, and we pretty well take care of the rest. As I mentioned earlier, no kayaking or camping experience is necessary. And pretty well, our kayak with whales and our whales and grizzly bear tour are designed for participants 15 and older. But our family kayak with whales is designed for families with children as young as 6. But this is the reason why people are coming. It's the wildlife. The orcas, the humpback whales, they're kind of our ambassadors to the area. And when I started this business 20-some years ago, if we saw 1 humpback whale the entire summer, we considered ourselves lucky. Now we're pretty well seeing humpback whales and multiple humpback whales every day. And of course, the orcas are a great attraction for people to visit as well. Now, we never guarantee any particular wildlife sightings. We always say you're going to see a lot, but we are dealing with wildlife. We're not in an aquarium. So if you do have guests asking, oh, I really want to see orcas, when is the best time to come? We suggest mid-July and later. We might see them earlier in the season, but the reliability is much less early in the season. So middle of July or later to give your clients the best chance of seeing the orcas. But as I said, all summer long, it's just great for all the wildlife. And my favorite time to come actually is middle of August to middle of September, because that's when we tend to have both the most abundant wildlife and also the most diverse wildlife as well. I just saw some Pacific white-sided dolphins, stellar sea lions, harbor seals. Well, this might be the one animal I can guarantee we see. We have quite a few of these hauled out around our base camps. And of course, grizzly bears on our whales and grizzly bear trip. Do want to point out we're not viewing the grizzly bears by kayak. This is where I work with Seawolf Adventures, and they pick up our guests by boat on the last day to take them grizzly bear viewing by boat. And while the humpbacks and the orcas are the ambassadors, our job is really to show our guests all the different wildlife that is in the area, including the birds and lots of different seabirds as well. So the trips themselves take a maximum of 10 guests with 3 guides, and we use both stable double kayaks and single kayaks, giving guests an opportunity to paddle in each kind. Generally, we're paddling about 2.5 hours in the morning, stop for an hour or 2 for lunch on a nearby beach or island, and another 2.5 hours in the afternoon. That's really only about 5 hours of kayaking out of a 24-hour day. So quite often we're seeing just as much wildlife from shore as we are from our kayaks. That photo in the bottom left off in the distance, that's a humpback whale below that we're just watching from camp. And we often have them feeding right next to our camps as well. And when I ask our guests what a highlight of the trip is, it's often quite different than what they came out expecting. And it's not always something that they saw either. Quite often it's something that they heard, like waking up in the middle of the night in your oceanside tent and hearing the whales blowing right outside your tents. Let's see. And this is a typical August day. It's often quite foggy in the morning and burning off as the day progresses. And we just thought this, just walking into the rainforest, just some beautiful light coming through as well. So it's the sights, the sounds, it's the smells, if you're downwind of the sea lions, and even the feel. You can feel the moisture in the air on a day like today. And I'd be doing a disservice if I only showed nice sunny mornings or days. Paddling in fog is also a possibility, and one of my favorite things to do as well, because it really tends to amplify the sounds. And if you just sit out there, take your time and listen, you can actually hear the wildlife all around you as well. And just a little bit about the camp itself, or life at camp. Obviously, we want to eat well. And with advance notice, we can pretty well deal with any dietary restrictions. But this would be our typical first night meal. An appetizer of baked brie with baguettes and grapes. We do a sockeye salmon barbecued on cedar planks, served with fresh greens, baby potatoes, cheesecakes for desserts. My wife makes those, and she made almost 500 of those this year. And we really try to focus kind of homemade goods on our trips. I know she also baked over 3,000 cookies, 75 zucchini loaves, and we provide a lot of the food for our base camp trips from our home garden. And we have about 50 chickens at home as well. So providing even the eggs on our trips come from our home garden. This is just a basic photo of our dining area. This was early in the season when no one was there, so it was easy just to show it. We serve our meals family style around a big table. That little bench at the back, that usually has all the mugs, the teas, the coffees all set up for people to help themselves. But in a perfect world, we're actually not even eating dinner in here. On a beautiful evening, we're just going to go and serve dinner right out on the rocks so people can still see what's swimming by, watching wildlife while eating dinner as well. New for us this year is we upgraded our tents. We always had kind of big roomy tents, but we've gone even bigger this year. And part of our kind of purchasing considerations is where things are made as well. So these tents are actually made right here on Vancouver Island. They're a canvas wall tent, 10 feet by 12 feet, 8 feet high in the middle. So nice and roomy tents. All on wooden platforms. The ones that are a little higher have stairs leading up to them. Inside, two basic single beds, tables, lamps. We provide all the bedding, the sleeping bags, the pillows, the sheets, extra blankets, and even hot water bottles. And the beds can be pushed together, and the size pushed together is the equivalent of a queen size bed. And a little coat rack at the bottom of the bed as well. So it is camping, but it's very comfortable camping. And while not a front and center on our website, tour operators always ask about the toilet facilities. We are camping. There are two outhouses, but it's not your typical hole in the ground. Each of these have a holding tank inside of them. People do their business, sprinkle a little seed or sawdust on top, and after about a day's use, they get sealed up and another holding tank gets put in. So the guests, actually some of our TripAdvisor reviews compliment us on how well the toilets operate, and not something they're expecting when they're out camping. And I did this shot just to show a little blue barrel on the outside. We have a rain catchment system, and on the left is just a water pump, or so people can wash up quite easily. And we have a number of those throughout the camp and back at the kitchen. A very basic shower. This is actually changing for this coming year. We always had a kind of this rustic safari style shower where we heat up the water on the stove, fill up the bucket, enough to get people wet, soap up and rinse off. This year, though, we have increased our rain catchment system, so we're actually turning this to an on-demand hot water system. Don't have a photo of that to show you yet. That one for a moment. And yeah, tours depart. We start middle of June and go till the middle of September. And let's see. I just got something popping up on my screen out of the way there. So the one thing that's not included on these trips is we don't provide alcohol on the trip. Guests are always welcome to bring their own to drink responsibly at the end of the evening. Pre and post tour accommodations are not included, as well as gratuities, but we can always package all of these for our tour operators as well. Okay, so now leading me into Seawolf Adventures. So Seawolf is owned by Mike Willie. He's a local First Nations individual. And the main product that Seawolf Adventures does are viewing grizzly bears. And their Grizzly Bears of the Wild Tour is also a Canadian signature experience. And they depart from Port McNeill at 7 o'clock daily throughout the summer. And the tours average about 10 hours. Sometimes they can be a little longer, sometimes they might be a little shorter, depending on both the weather and the wildlife viewing possibilities. Minimum age on this is 10. And viewing is generally done from their larger boat or Zodiacs. But late in the season, if the salmon are running up the river, they may actually go on land, walk up the rivers, and sit to watch them catch the bears catching salmon as well. But that is dependent on the salmon being in the rivers. And this past year was a little poor for that. So they continued to do their viewing from the boats along the beaches and in the estuaries. And now just a couple of bear photos for you. So this is just one of the photos where they are walking up alongside the river. So people do have to be comfortable walking a short distance over uneven ground. And of course, while the bears are the feature, there's lots of other wildlife to view on this trip as well. And this is just a picture of their boat, their larger boat that they're doing the viewing from. And as you can see here, there's a Zodiac on top. They have two of those that they can take down if they're viewing closer into the shallows. And to get guests onto the shore, there is a ladder right at the front, so they can come right into the beach and let guests off on the beach as well. And just comfortable interior seating. There's actually USB chargers throughout, so people can charge their cameras and that quite easily as well. Their Grizzly Bears of the Wild is limited to 10 and older, but they do offer private family tours as well. And that can be either on a Zodiac or on a covered vessel, depending on boat availability. But what Mike did really want me to highlight today for him was their whale watching and cultural tour. They've been doing it for a little while now, and it's really gaining a lot of traction. And they're going to start offering this all season long now, where it combines both obviously whale watching, a couple of hours of whale watching, and then they visit Alert Bay in the Umista Cultural Center to learn more of the Kwakwaka'wakw First Nations that live in the area. This is just entering the Cultural Center. Some of the masks, and what's quite unique about the Umista Cultural Center is all the exhibits there are actually items that are used on a regular basis. So sometimes you might go in and where a mask is, there'll be a little sign saying out at potlatch, where the families who they belong to will take them out for different celebrations and potlatches. And this is just Mike here, taking people through the cultural center and one of the graveyards in Alert Bay with the mortuary poles. And again, obviously the whales, dolphins, and the orcas. Okay, so that now leads me into coastal rainforest safaris. Our first trip is in May of 2020. Both Mike and myself are owners of this business. And how this business came about is Mike and I were actually at a trade show, and Mike was saying how many times he gets asking for a multiple day trip. They love what he does, but they want to do something more than just one day with him. And they just don't want to go back and stay in a hotel in town. They want a more immersive experience. And I said, well, funny thing is I get a lot of people who want to do our multi-day base camp trips, but it's often the kayaking that's holding them back. They're not sure they want to be kayaking for 4 days. So we kind of combine both of what the things that we do to come up with coastal rainforest safaris. So it is a multi-day wildlife viewing camp. All the wildlife viewing is done by boat or on land. We're using a boat very similar to what Mike currently uses at Seawolf Adventures, except we are making a few modifications. We're taking less guests, so we're removing a couple of seats and putting in a full stand-up toilet in the boat as well. So making it a little bit more comfortable for the guests, and having less guests, there's more deck space to view wildlife from on the boat as well. I mentioned earlier, Mike is from one of the local First Nations, and that is actually going to be a kind of a component of our trips where we're looking to hire as many of the local Indigenous people as our staff and our guides as well. And while cultural interpretation is going to be intertwined for our whole trip, we do recognize that people are coming primarily for the wildlife viewing, but then just throughout the trip, we're going to be incorporating some of the cultural components to it as well. So you have to forgive me in that the camp is actually under construction at this very moment. So we don't have a lot of photos of the camp to show you. This is one of the, I'll be honest, this is a stock photo that I have here. But the tents are also made on Vancouver Island. There are larger versions of what I use at Kingfisher. The whole camp is going to be boardwalked. We come in a protected cove, and it's about a 35-step staircase up to the camp. And from those stairs, it's boardwalk to each of the individual tents, and then to the dining and kitchen, dining and lounge room building as well. So each of the tents are going to be, the sleeping areas are 12 by 14, have a king size bed or two twins, dressers, full on furniture, propane fireplace in each. But the real big difference is, and this is what we were hearing from the travel trade, is each of these are going to have a private ensuite bathroom as well with a full toilet, sink, and shower. So that's not really shown in this photo. There's going to be an addition added onto the back that's also covered in canvas, so it looks like the tent. But once you are inside the tent, you go through a doorway from your sleeping area right into the enclosed bathroom. And where at Kingfisher, the guides do everything. With coastal rainforest safaris, we're definitely upping not only the accommodation, but the service level as well. In addition to the guides, full-time chef, kitchen staff, and housekeeping as well. And again, while we can accommodate pretty well any dietary restriction, our main focus is definitely going to be on the local seafood and indigenous inspired meals as well. And unlike Kingfisher, where I told you we don't provide alcohol, with coastal rainforest safaris, we do provide local wines and beers complimentary at dinner time and in the evening as well. But while the camp is great, it's really the wildlife that people are coming to see. And I'll be honest with you, if you have guests who just say, I want to see bears, I want to see bears, I want to see bears, we may not be the best option. We really are about the whole experience, and bear viewing is a big part of it. But generally, it's only going to be 1 or 2 days out of our entire package. And the bear viewing that we're doing, it's not going to be like, well, like Night Inlet, where you can pull in and the bears actually walk down towards the boats because they feel safe near the boats. The area that we're viewing, we're actually the only operator in this whole area. And the bears have actually been probably hunted more in this area than they've been viewed. Fortunately, there's no longer grizzly bear hunting in BC, but the bears are going to be a little bit more weary of us, and it's going to time to build a relationship. And there's just not as many of them as you would have in a Night Inlet. But the real attraction is we're the only people there. We're in a place like Night Inlet, you could be viewing the same bears side by side by side with 6 other boats, so 60 to 70 people. So ours is really trying to have that smaller, intimate experience not just within the group, but with the wildlife as well. And where we are, obviously the whale watching, orcas and humpbacks, and possibly gray and minke whales, and sea otters. Where Mike and I operate our existing businesses, sea otters are occasionally seen, but with Coastal Rainforest Safaris, we're about 50 miles north of there. And one of the areas that we visit, we can often see up to 100 sea otters rafted up. And we were out there in May, and it was all the mothers with the pups. It was quite the experience. And they're great to watch, but hard to get a good photo sometimes. And I'll hand it to Mike. He really nailed it with this photo. And birds. There's actually a large seabird nesting colony not too far away from our camp called the Duke of Edinburgh Ecological Reserve, where I think it's something like 70% of the world's leech storm petrels nest. But there's also fork-tailed storm petrels, rhinoceros auklets, and lots of other seabirds nesting in the area as well. When I was talking about the Indigenous cultural interpretation, like our typical first day coming out of Port Hardy, while we could be at the camp within about 50 minutes, we plan to take 4 to 5 hours to get there and make getting there part of the experience. And as we come out of Port Hardy, we go past an island, Bell Island, that has about a 30-foot deep shell midden, which highlights the thousands and thousands of years that the local nations have been there harvesting seafood. So it allows us to start to give a bit of the history and historical context of the area right at the beginning. And on the left, that's a picture of, that's Sherry, who works with Mike at Seawolf. And she's going to be working with us at CRS next year as well. And she was out helping us scout bear viewing areas in the spring. And, just at the end of the day, she went and picked some plants to take home. But each of those, and she shared this with everyone on board, has traditional usages. So she was just sharing that with the people on board as well. That's what I'm saying. It's just kind of an everyday thing. It's not necessarily drums or dancing. It's just people being people and doing what comes naturally. So the area that we're operating in is part of the Gosala Aqueduct First Nations territory, and we're working very closely with them to have their permissions to operate in this area. And fortunately, Mike, being a hereditary chief of a neighboring First Nations, is well respected within the community, and he actually taught in their elementary school as well. So he was able to help us, usher us through the whole process of working with the nation rather quickly, allowing us to be up and operating for next May. But part of our agreement with the nation is we really do want to provide employment and opportunities for the local community to be working with us as well. And we recognize that that may not happen right off the bat, that there may not be that many people at the level of service and experience that we want, but we are specifically creating some training positions where we'll be developing new local Indigenous staff to work with us. And a part of that program includes having an elder in residence program. We've been fortunate where one of the elders in the nation has been very positive about this whole program, about Coastal Rainforest Safaris. So we're already talking to have him out at the camp throughout the summer, and other elders as well, who can provide information to our guests, but also to provide training to some of these young people that we're bringing up. Where Mike and I can do the tourism and hospitality training, having an elder there to do the cultural training, we look at as being very positive to both us and the individuals as well. So this trip does depart from Port Hardy at the north end of Vancouver Island. The first night is spent at the Quililis Hotel in Port Hardy. And Quililis is a Kwakwala word meaning a place to sleep. And as I mentioned earlier, easy flights from Vancouver up to Port Hardy with Pacific Coastal Airlines. So included with Coastal Rainforest Safaris, so just mentioned the first night at the Quililis Hotel, transportation between the Quililis and the dock where we board our boat. We do have an office in the Quililis Hotel. So the morning of the trip, the guests meet us at our office, and they can leave any excess luggage at our office while they're out on trip with us. And then return boat transportation between Port Hardy and the Coastal Rainforest Safari Camp. We did put a little asterisk next to that. Um, while we could safely get people back and forth, no problem, there could be a few days out of the year where high seas may not make it the most comfortable experience for people. So we do have the backup option of using a float plane to transport guests between the Port Hardy and the camp. And once we're at the camp, there's other more protected routes that we can take them by boat. We don't see this being an everyday occurrence. Out of a 20-week season, we're probably forecasting 3 or 4 trips where we might need to use a float plane to transport the guests. But I just like to highlight that just nothing worse than someone coming on a trip expecting to get on a boat and then we ask them to get on a float plane. So we just like to highlight that that is a possibility. And then, yeah, also included is then the 3 nights at the safari camp, all meals, all snacks, the complimentary wine and craft beer, the daily guided excursions, rain gear, rain boots, and all the different fees. And something different with this trip is recognizing the clientele that we're going after compared to, say, Kingfisher or Seawolf. We are making it all inclusive, and that includes gratuities as well. No one has to worry about tipping at the end of the trip. It's all just incorporated into the price. And just as I'm wrapping up here, just a couple of photos of the Quililas Hotel in Port Hardy. The local First Nations done a great job renovating and designing this hotel to have that First Nations theme. And throughout the hotel, throughout the lobby, there's artwork, and even every individual room has a First Nations component. Artwork on the walls, and even the blankets having a First Nations artwork motif on them as well. So as I mentioned earlier, these trips start in mid-May and go to mid-October, 5 days and 4 nights. These are the retail rates that are listed here. And at Kingfisher, we didn't have a single occupancy supplement, but with Coastal Rainforest Safaris, we do. So it does cost extra if you're on a single occupancy. And space is limited. We generally have 2 spots available for single travelers on these trips. And let's see, where am I now? And I think that pretty well wraps up what I wanted to review. And I think I'll hand it back over to Charlie and answer any questions people might have.
Andrew, thank you so much. We do love our wildlife, and well, all three of those experiences, absolutely fantastic ways to view the wildlife, but very exciting about your new Coastal Rainforest Safaris product. So congratulations.
Thank you. And I do, as I said, that is the main reason why I'm here to promote it. And I do recognize that while I still think viewing wildlife from kayaks is a great thing to do, that definitely Rainforest Safaris makes the wildlife viewing accessible to a wider range of people. And yeah, I think we're going to do some great things with it.
Yeah, it's very exciting. Thank you. Anybody, do you have any questions for Andrew on any of those products, but particularly Coastal Rainforest Safaris? We do love to hear about new things, so it's always very exciting, and of course to support new products where you can. So speak to your preferred wholesalers if you're keen to book any of these experiences. Neville has a question. Oh, no, Neville just says, thank you, Andrew and Charlie. Great new venture and your Coastal Rainforest Safaris. Wishing you all the best. Thanks, Neville.
Thank you.
Any questions? Oh, I did just have one. You were talking about the boat, or well, I was thinking that a float plane would be a bonus, so I'd be quite happy to do that. But how long is that boat trip out to the camp?
So the boat trip, as I mentioned, we could do it in 50 minutes. If we wanted to get there quickly, but we look at getting to the camp as part of the experience. And we'll go look at cultural sites, look at whales, look at sea otters as part of that whole experience. But if the weather was coming in, yeah, we could make a shortcut and get there rather quickly. And if it was higher seas that might make people uncomfortable, that's where we have the float plane as a backup option.
Yeah, thank you. Lisa says, yep, that was great. Thank you. Shelley says, does the seaplane option cost more then?
No, it doesn't. While it might cost us a little bit more, we're not going to be charging the customers anything else. We recognize that it probably will only happen a few times out of a year, and we're going to do it more for a customer comfort point of view. And we're not going to charge any extra if we need to go that route. We'll just do
Yes,
whatever.
just
We're going to make sure the customers are happy is what it comes down to.
yeah, contingency plan, always good to have. Okay, any other questions? No, of course you will get follow-up from me with the recording and also some follow-up from Andrew as well. I'll pass your details over to him so he can send you more information. And then, of course, if you need anything, you can ask him any questions. I think we will sign off there then. Perfect timing, Andrew, as well. So thanks everybody for coming. Have a great day, and we will see you next time.
Great, thank you.